Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 14th of December of 2025. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. So the most important updates of the 14th of December of 2025 are coming from the territory of Germany, from Berlin, where the meeting between Zelensky and the European leaders and the representatives of the United States of America is taking place. So the sources reported that the representatives of the United States of America have already arrived. So in this video we can see Witkoff and Kushner arrived in Berlin for talks to end the conflict in Ukraine. That was stated by the Associated Press. So they came and they started waiting for Zelensky. And of course before this meeting, because this very important meeting, both the Germans, the Americans, the Ukrainians, the Europeans made lots of interesting statements. For example, the German Chancellor Friedrich Merz declared that Ukraine is Europe's shield, and if it falls, Putin will not stop. So this is his statement. Another important statement made by him that he declared that the Pax America over, warning of a permanent US withdrawal from Europe. Furthermore, according to information we have, according to the Axios journalist Barak Revit, reports that Zelensky will hold a separate meeting with U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. White House Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Donald Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner will meet with Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky in Berlin today, and then meet separately with the national security advisors of Germany, France, and the United Kingdom. Earlier reports indicated that the European Union leaders were also expected to participate in the talks. So as you can see, this is a very important meeting that is going to happen today. But at the same time, Zelensky also made lots of important statements. Basically, he highlighted the most important questions and issues that still haven't been resolved. Today, a fair option regarding the Donbas issue should be we stand where we stand. Then we resolve the issue, but the Russians do not support this. I would like the Americans to support us on this issue, but to our signal. The Russians respond that we must withdraw from Donbas or they will occupy it anyway. Another important thing is that Zelensky warned Ukrainian citizens of imminent compromises. He stated that he has not yet received an official response from the United States to his new peace plan proposal. I haven't received a reaction from the US yet. I've heard few messages through the negotiation team, but I'm receiving all the signals and I'm ready for dialogue, he said. According to him, his plan won't be on that satisfies everyone. Many compromises will be required. The most important thing is that the plan be as fair as possible, first and foremost to Ukraine. So this is the situation. As we can see, there's still lots of issues that haven't been resolved, and telling the truth, I believe that these issues will not be resolved today during the upcoming meeting. Zelensky confirmed that the US is urging Ukraine to withdraw troops from Donbas. The US is proposing a compromise to withdraw troops while Russian troops will not enter the region. That was stated by Zelensky as well. And the most important statement made by Zelensky, if these negotiations fail, it is important not to lose control and to think about other paths to peace. So this is the situation. So the question is why the United States of America is urging Zelensky so much. Why they try to force him to accept these Russia's demands today, but not in a month, not in 6 months, and so on. And the answer to this question is simple, because the thing that we can see, the map that we can see right now in front of your screens, most likely in 6 months will be changed significantly. Today, we have the situation when the Russians managed to break through very difficult and very powerful defense lines through the entire line of combat contact. And the Russians entered lots of operational space through the entire Ukraine, which can lead to unpredictable consequences for Ukraine in coming months. So let's discuss everything in details. And first, let's talk about the southern part of Ukraine. During the previous 48 hours, the Russians were bombing and attacking the southern part of Odessa significantly. Everything started 3 days ago when the Russians first attacked and destroyed a ship that was located on the territory of the Odessa port infrastructure. So this is the moment when the Russians attacked the vessel with drone. The vessel was completely destroyed, and right after this attack, Ukrainians struck back with missiles and drones as well, and then the Russians launched another wave of attack. And according to information we have, today the Russians were focused mainly on attacking the territory around the city by the name of Zatoka. So this is the settlement that was attacked by the Russians, and the sources are saying that the Russians were trying to destroy the Zatoka bridge, this one. And we have just one video from this area, this one. Here we can see how a civilian was making a video about the situation in this area while the Russians were attacking this territory. The sources are saying that the Russians were bombing the Zatoka bridge with drones, with bombs. So today the source reported that for the first time since the beginning of the special military operation, the Russians attacked the Odessa region with bombs, and the distance between the Odessa region and the Crimea region is more than 200 kilometers. So somehow the Russians managed to attack this territory, and the Russians dealt significant damage. And right before I start making this video, we had a report that Russians managed to destroy the bridge. So we haven't added this article to the map, and we will not discuss this in details because maybe this is just speculation. Anyway, let's wait and see, but obviously by the beginning of the next video we will understand it clearly whether the Russians managed to destroy the bridge or not. So this is a very important area, this is a very important logistic road, and if indeed the Russians managed to destroy the bridge, this could lead to complete collapse of the Ukrainian logistic in this area. Another important thing that there are still problems with electricity. The Ukrainians haven't managed to restore the situation to a normal life. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Zaporozhye direction. And telling the truth, and according to my opinion, the most important and interesting updates are coming exactly from this area. So the Russians are advancing through the entire Zaporozhye direction in its western part, central and the eastern part as well. So let's discuss everything in details, and first let's talk about the western part. In comparison with the previous update, we haven't received anything special or anything additional, just one thing, that the Russians managed to take under complete control this dense network of the fortifications to the south of the settlement of Lukyanovska, this territory. So nothing has been changed since that moment. We are waiting for additional geolocations and more proofs from pro-Russian or pro-Ukrainian sources, but according to different sources, this let's say configuration is the current reality in this direction. So of course this is a very important progress, very important offensive operation from the Russian side, but this is not the most important update. The most important update is coming from the eastern Zaporozhye direction. And no, the Russians still haven't managed to capture the settlement of Gulay Pole. There are still very heavy clashes for this territory. The Ukrainians are holding their lines. The situation is very difficult, but the Ukrainians are holding the lines despite the fact that the Russians managed to cross the river of Haichul in this area and to answer the Ukrainian side, and currently the Russians are trying to dig in deeper. So as for the previous 24 hours, as you can see, we haven't received many changes on the ground. So we have some, but they're not so important. The Russians improved their positions according to different mappers. In the area of the Velika Street, the Russians improved their positions in the most northern part of the settlement, in the area of the Dachna Street and Beregova Street. The most important updates are coming from the area of the settlement of Varvarovka. So today, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation reported that the Russians managed to take under complete control the settlement of Varvarovka. This information was provided by pro-Russian sources, and this information was confirmed by this video. Here we can see how exactly the clashes for this territory were taking place, and as usually in the videos of this type, we can see soldiers, Russian soldiers, through the settlement of Varvarovka raising the Russian flag. So in this video we can see at least two flags that were raised by the Russian forces, and these two flags were geolocated. One of the flags was raised exactly at this point at the beginning of the settlement of Varvarovka, and the second one was raised at this point in the central part of the settlement. So based on the reports, based on the video, we adjusted the map. So this is the situation by the end of the 13th of December, and this is the end of the 14th of December of 2025. But the fact that the Russians managed to improve their positions along the R85 road is also not the most important update. The most important update is coming from the territory a bit further to the north. So as you can see, we have significant changes on the ground. Let's compare the map between the dates. This is the end of the 13th of December of 2025, and this is the end of the 14th of December. So today, several pro-Russian sources reported that as a result of clashes, the armored force of the Russian Federation managed to improve their positions along the road R85 and to cross the river of Haichul. So this is the most important piece of news. So this is the river. Let's add the river to the map for the better understanding of the situation. So this is the river, and according to several pro-Russian sources, they managed to improve their positions, to cross the river, and to take several strongholds on the Ukrainian side of the river. So this is the river, approximately this is the river. And Russians, as you can see, managed to take this stronghold to the west of the settlement of Zaporozhye. The Russians most likely managed to cross the river somehow and to answer and to secure this area. Furthermore, the Russians managed to improve their positions and to capture another stronghold, but this time to the north of the settlement of Priluki and to the southwest of the settlement of Dobropolye. The Russians also crossed the river, captured these tree lines and fortifications in this area. So this is the most important piece of news, not just when talking about the only Zaporozhye direction. As of my opinion, to my opinion, this is the most important updates through the entire special military operation, because as we discussed in the previous videos, the Russians managed to take under control the dense network of the fortifications. We called this area as the Zaporozhye Wall, and we see that the Zaporozhye Wall was breached by the Russians. They managed to breach this area, they managed to dig in deeper, or maybe they're currently trying to dig in deeper. Now it's clear that Russians will try to improve their positions with the purpose, first of all, to take these strongholds between these two breakthrough areas under complete control. They will try to maintain this bridgehead like this, and obviously from these positions the Russians will attack the settlement of Ternovata and the territory around. And if Russians are able to do this, then as we discussed in the previous videos, the Russians will enter the Zaporozhye operational space, and from these positions the Russians will continue advancing further in the western direction until they get the city of Zaporozhye itself. And as I understand, this is the only reason why the United States of America are trying to force Zelensky to accept demands right now, not to postpone this issue or not to postpone this question for the next months after the referendum and so on, because as we discussed in the previous videos, this distance between the river of Haichul and the city of Zaporozhye, very likely the Russians will be able to pass through the next probably within the next 5-6 months. So it's obviously that's most likely if the war continues, if Ukrainians and Europeans reject the proposal of the Russian Federation and the United States of America, it's clear that during the autumn of 2026, the battle for the city of Zaporozhye will take place. But as we discussed in the previous video, there will be no battle because the city of Zaporozhye, at least the main part of the city, is located on the Russian side of the river of Dnipro, which means that if Russians are able to block the city from the south, from the southeast, from the east, from the northeast, and from the north, we're talking about, let's say, this red line. From these positions, from this configuration, the Ukrainians will be forced to fall back without any possibilities to support and supply the city with normal supply, with food, with water, with arms, and so on. So this is the reason we believe why the United States of America urges Ukraine to accept the demands of the Russian Federation, because then the situation would be much worse in comparison with the current situation. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Pokrovsk-Mirnograd direction. During the previous 24 hours, pro-Ukrainian sources improved their maps. According to them, the Russians continue offensive operation in the area of the settlements of Rovna, so we can see a huge gap between pro-Ukrainian sources and pro-Russian and neutral mappers. So very big gap, but we see that despite the gap, the pro-Ukrainian sources are removing and reducing this gap from one day to another. As for the Konstantinovka direction, during the previous 24 hours, several sources reported that Russians launched a major offensive operation with the purpose to take under complete control the territory between the villages of Rusin Yar, Stepanovka, Yablunovka, and Ivanopolye. So this red line is the line of combat contact the Russians are tasked to get in during the next days. So this information was confirmed mainly by pro-Russian sources. One of the offensive operations was launched launched in the direction of Stepanovka. Another offensive operation was launched from the settlement of Yablunivka in the direction of N20 road, and the Russians began advancing from the village of Vanapole in the direction of Bereztok as well. So Russians are trying to maintain the lines to take these territories under complete control. And you know that today we got a very interesting, let's say, idea, very interesting analytics published by different sources, and telling the truth, I have completely forgotten about the situation. You know that the Russians are trying now not just to, let's say, push the Ukrainians from the inside Donetsk region. The Russians, first of all, are trying to take under complete control the road, the highway N32. So this is the highway we are talking about. This highway goes through the city of Pokrovsk, through the settlement of Mirnograd. Then this highway goes further in the eastern direction towards the city of Konstantinovka. Through the settlement of Konstantinovka, this highway moves further in the eastern direction to the city of Chasov then to the settlement of Bakhmut. And then from the city of Bakhmut, this road goes further in the eastern direction towards the settlements and towards the different towns and villages in the Lugansk and Donetsk regions, and especially we're talking about the city of Severodonetsk, Lysychansk, and of course we are talking about, let's say, the settlements like Lugansk. So this highway can improve the Russian logistics in the future, and the Russians will be able to improve their logistics, to improve supply and support of their contingent. Of course, it will take time to restore this road between Severodonetsk, Lugansk, and the city of Pokrovsk. But if Russian, but this is not something like to build something in the space. It's just a matter of time and equipment you can use for these purposes. And as soon as the Russians restore this logistic line, of course, it will be much easier for them to advance further in the direction of the Kharkiv and Dnipropetrovsk regions, so to the borders of the Donetsk region, to the last borders. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Sivers direction. During the previous 12 hours, the Russians continued their offensive operation in this area. Ukrainians, as we can see, began retreating from this territory when the Russians began their major offensive. Just take a look at the map and just take a look at how the map was changing. Has been changing since the beginning of December of 2025. Every single day we were adjusting the map in the Russian favor, moving the front line further in the southern and the western directions towards the settlement of Slaviansk. Today the sources reported that Ukrainians were forced to fall back from the fields to the west of the city of Siversk, and of course we understand that the Russians have already improved their positions, first of all FPV drone positions on the territory of the city of Siversk. Now the Russians can secure and can control huge territories from the city of Siversk almost till the settlement of Raya Alexandrovka, maybe even further, so that the Russians can control everything in 15 kilometers with drones. So from the city of Siversk with its high-rise buildings, with the communication equipment that can be installed. So Ukrainians, according to this configuration, will face huge problems in this area, because this territory is under complete FPV drone control, under complete, let's say, different types of intelligence control. So which means that Ukrainians would be forced to fall back under the pressure of the armed forces of the Russian Federation in this area. So, and of course, we see that the city of Slaviansk is very, very close to the current situation. The Russians will intensify their offensive operation in this area, but as of the 14th of December, we still haven't received anything about the city of Liman. It seems that the Russians are planning to avoid the battle for the settlement until they maintain the line, probably between the city of Liman and the settlement of Bakhmut or Chasov Yar. Maybe then Russians will continue, but now the Russians are focused just on this pocket. They see that Ukrainians are retreating, so that is why the Russians are rushing and pushing them. Now let's talk about the Kupiansk direction. During the previous 24 hours, the Ukrainians improved their positions. They continue their counter-offensive operation. But yes, we see that Ukrainians counter-attacked and managed to improve their positions significantly. And we have this video with Zelensky, who was on the outskirts of the settlement. By the way, today another video was published, but this time by pro-Russians, by pro-Ukrainian sources. And here we can see the same area where Zelensky was was, and this area was completely destroyed. So this territory was completely destroyed with FPV drones, and this is exactly the place where Zelensky was made the video. So anyway, the Ukrainians are counterattacking, but everything depends not on the skills of Ukrainian soldiers or not on the defensive capabilities of the Russian forces. Everything depends on the meeting on the territory of Berlin. Ukrainians launched massive attack through the Russian Federation with drones. Ukrainians launched counteroffensive operation in the city of Kupiansk because they wanted to have stronger positions and stronger card before the meeting on the territory of Berlin. So this meeting will be finished this evening, and there are very high chances that Ukraine will stop their counteroffensive operation tomorrow, because most likely they understand that maybe it's not time to let's say lose soldiers and troopers, and it's better to control and to save control over the territories they have right now. Because if you remember, we discussed that Zelensky Syrsky was forced to take forces and troops from the Sumy region to stabilize and to counterattack in the area of Kupiansk, and now Ukrainians most likely have some problems and issues with manpower in this direction, and of course the Russians are using the situation. As for the previous 24 hours, we haven't received anything from the Sumy direction that can confirm additional progress on the ground, but during the previous 3 days we had lots of reports about the situation. So let's wait and see what is going to be next. Let's wait for results of talks in Berlin. But today, for example, the special aide, Putin's special aide Ushakov, in an interview with the program Moscow Kremlin, Putin stated that none of this will work from him. Regarding Crimea, it's a sure thing, 1,000,000%, and regarding NATO, I think it's also 1,000,000%. So he was talking about chances that Ukraine will not, let's say, gets into the NATO organization. So Russians knows the answers already, but let's wait and see the official statements from Berlin. And obviously this upcoming night is going to be very interesting. And that's it for the short for today. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.